Alrighty, here we are. It is our live review, and 8 o'clock, starting right on time. Hopefully I have a few of you guys. Oh, look, I got some people watching. That's always good to see those numbers go up. All right, so like I said in class, we are going to do a quick review. By quick, I mean probably about, I've slotted an hour for this to go through periods 1 and 2 to prepare us for our exam tomorrow. Now, let me go ahead and throw this out there. Since I'm on YouTube Live, there's about a 15-20 second lag between me talking and it actually going to you. So if you post a question or something like that, it's going to take me a few seconds before I might actually see it. If we start seeing a stream of questions coming in, I mean, that stream will keep going, and if I miss something, just let me know and I'll scroll back and get it. So I'll do the best I can to get all of this, to get your questions answered and to hit everything that we need to cover for tomorrow's exam. The cough is on high alert tonight, so bear with me as I work through it, but I think we're ready to go. Now, your test tomorrow is 30 multiple choice questions. These are stimulus-based multiple choice questions, which means there's a stimulus that's going to go with 2 or 3 different questions. Now, just real quickly, how do you approach the questions? I just want to review this on you guys again. Number 1, read the source first. Always look at the source of the stimulus. Look at the year and who's talking. Sometimes that will tell you what the document is about. Once you know the source and you've kind of, centered yourself on the time period they're talking about, then you go and read the actual document. And, I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time breaking it down. Just read through it. And then look at the questions. And when you read the question and all 4 answers. The next step, eliminate 2 of the questions, because without a doubt, 2 of the questions are completely wrong. Or 2 of the answers, I'm sorry. So get rid of those and look at what's left. Generally, you'll have 2 answers that are very close to being correct. Just one is more correct. And that's going to be the challenge. And that's always the challenge on AP exams. Now, going forward, this is not a test about your specific knowledge of history. This is a test that looks at your ability to implement the skills of history, cause and effect, similarities and differences, contextualization, stuff like that. So like I explained in class, you'll never get a question, what happened in 1607? Instead, that's the Jamestown settlement. Instead, you'll get a question like, how did the geography affect the settlement of Jamestown? And then you have to, talk about Jamestown and what went on there and understand why they settled where they did, why they had success, why they had failures, and all that other stuff. So in a stimulus-based multiple choice test, especially for College Board, you're looking at big ideas, the big picture of things. Now, when we get to the SAQ portion on Friday, that's where the details are going to matter. That's where your content knowledge is really going to play a key role, because in the SAQs is where you bring evidence in to prove your answer. So it's important to study the content for this test tomorrow, but realize as you're studying it, think about, I gave you guys some guiding questions. What were the effects of different things? What were some similarities and differences between the different colonial regions? What about the relationship between the colonists, both, Spanish, French, and Dutch and English? What was their relationship with the Native Americans? And how did those compare to each other? Those are the kind of ideas you want to think about as you're preparing for this exam tomorrow. Okay. I didn't even think about that. Yeah. Live stream is restricted to school emails. Dang it. I didn't even think about that. So hopefully, I got people watching. So hopefully everyone figured that one out. Didn't even dawn on me. I'm sorry about that. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to share this PowerPoint with you. And I'm going to be in the screen, but I don't like how I look in the screen. So sorry. You just got to deal with me. All right. Let me go here. I got it stuck in the middle here, so let me go back a little bit. Sorry. I was practicing before. Okay. So we're going to start with period 1, 1491. Now, 1491 designates everything that happened before the Europeans arrived here, specifically the Spanish. When you look at 1491, I want you to think of the Native American regions and what each region was focused on. For instance, when you look at the Great Plains, these are typically the natives we always think about, the ones we see in the movies. These are the Kiowa, the Comanche, the Cheyenne. These are the Native Americans who were the hunter-gatherers, and they fought. They fought. And they hunted, and they followed the herd or the game wherever it went. Hunted stuff like buffalo and antelope and deer and other animals like that, and they're reliant on those animals. But then when we move down towards the Southwest, that's where we're seeing the maize cultivation, that the growth of, the three sister farming and stuff like that. So you have more sedentary lifestyle in this region. And we're talking about the Pueblo and the Navajo and the Apache. All of these are a little bit more sedentary. Now, they still hunt. Just because they're farmers doesn't mean they don't hunt, but they don't rely solely on hunting and gathering like you see in the Great Plains. You go over into the woodland area, that's where you're going to find like the tribes like the Mound Builders and those, and the Shawnees, another one. And they're the ones they're the trade networks. They also do agriculture, they also do hunting and gathering, but they're building large cities that are trading with other tribes and stuff like that. The Northeast, the big tribes you need to go over there, the Iroquois Confederacy. One of the largest confederacies in history is the Iroquois. And they have agriculture up there. They're more sedentary. They live in the long houses. They don't live in teepees like we picture with Native Americans and stuff like that. But this is the kind of stuff I want you to think about when you think of the Native Americans. Think about their relationships with one another. Think about the processes they used for farming and agriculture and stuff like that. I mean, we know some of them built some amazing irrigation systems and everything like that. And then think about the lifestyle they lived when the Europeans arrived. One thing I mentioned to you guys when in my videos and we talked about was how most of these tribes followed a matrilineal line where women, the power of a tribe came from the woman's side of the family, completely foreign to these foreigners who are coming in to North America. They'd never heard of anything like that. And then they come into a lot of these different regions and see the women doing all this work in the tribe. They were the ones doing the farming and keeping up the village and everything like that while the men went off hunting. And that's one reason why Europeans saw Native Americans almost as savage in the way they did it, because in Europe, you treated your women a certain way. And the men, had a very distinct role in society. Well, in the Native American societies, a lot of these where all the men did was hunt, they saw them as lazy because, think about it, in Europe, hunting was a pastime. Whereas here in North America, it was a way of life. So you look at this kind of stuff and you can see why the Europeans viewed natives as backwards and, and uncivilized. So keep that in mind when you think 1491. When the Spanish arrived, they're coming in after Columbus. Columbus got here in 1492. I don't think I have a slide on it, but remember the Columbian Exchange. Remember the effect that Columbus had on the Native Americans, and to a point, the effect the Native Americans had on the Europeans. With that Columbian Exchange, the Europeans benefited from it because all these new fresh products coming over and different animals coming over is going to extend the lifespan of many Europeans because they're going to start eating healthier. But on the other side of the ocean, here in North America, Native Americans are going to benefit from the Europeans coming over, because just the biggest one I can think of is the introduction of the horse and how that just changed the lifestyle, especially of the tribes in the Great Plains, and how that the horses became not only important for all their work, but for also all their fighting as well. So keep the Columbian Exchange. Remember, it was exchange of food, of animals, and of disease, okay? And now that I think about it, I do have a slide, so I'll probably repeat that. The group that's going to come in following Columbus is going to be the conquistadors. And these were the conquerors that are going to come in, and basically they're coming in to conquer. And the whole idea is they're gaining land for Spain. Spain is trying to increase its empire. And so they're going to come searching out the three G's: God, glory, and gold. When they get here, probably the first major conquering is going to be that of the Aztecs. And Hernan Cortez is going to be responsible for that. Now, he is going to implement this idea of keep your enemies, or what is it? Keep your friends, or what is it? Oh, keep your enemies close, but I don't even remember. It's late at night, I don't remember. But basically, he is going to make the enemies of the Aztecs his friends. And in doing so, they're going to form an alliance that will help take down the Aztec Empire. Now, it's not going to be a, land on the shore. Here we are. We've overtaken you. See ya. This is going to take place over a year or so before Cortez actually gets control of the Aztec Empire. When he does, they are going to, just basically the Spanish Empire is going to grow from there. Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec Empire, is actually present day. There it is. Thank you, Gabby. Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. I knew it was out there somewhere. Tenochtitlan is going to become modern day Mexico City. So this is going to be kind of the launching point of the Spanish conquering of North America. As far as knowing conquistadors, if you know a couple names, you'll be fine. Cortez, Balboa, de Gama, Magellan, all those. Just, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Yep, that's true too. See? It's all about teamwork, all about the team. All right. Think about the effects of the Spanish on especially the Native Americans. The Spanish are going to come in and they're going to create an hierarchy of society very similar to what you see in this pyramid here. The Spaniards are going to come in. Now, one big thing that comes out of the Spanish interaction with the Native Americans is going to be a new race of people called the mestizos. And I'm just noticing that my screen is kind of small there, so I apologize for that. Let me go back. The mestizos is a new race of people that was a combination of the Spanish and the Native Americans. Yet, because of their Spanish blood, they're in the middle of the hierarchy, but they're absolutely not the top. The top is going to be the Peninsulares. Those are Spaniards born in Spain. You have Creoles, who are people who were parents are Spanish, but they were born here in North America. And then at the bottom, you have the Native Americans and the enslaved people. Now, the big effect that the Spanish have on the Native Americans is the encomienda system. The encomienda system was a system of forced labor implemented by the Spanish into the Native American culture. It was initially set up as sold to the Native Americans as, hey, this is going to be a great thing for you guys because we're going to come in and we're going to work together. We'll be allies. We'll protect you. You'll work half a day for us. We'll give you some land. Everybody's going to benefit. But the reality was, you're going to work for us for as long as we want you to. And if you die, you die. We'll just pull in another one because we're here for God, glory, and gold. I left off the God part, didn't I? Yeah, that was the other side of it. They got to conquer the Native Americans before they can convert them. The way the Spanish are going to try to convert the Native Americans is with the mission system. The mission is going to be like the center of the villages and the towns that the Spanish want to create. It's going to be built alongside a presidio, which is a military fort. And the monks are going to come in, and their job is to convert the Native Americans. This was not something that they saw as a choice for the Native Americans. They saw this as their mission. Get it? The missions? All right. So they're going to come in, try to convert the Native Americans within the encomienda system. So, just picture the reality of that. I'm going to force you into labor. And while I'm forcing you into labor, I'm going to force my beliefs on you. And if you don't follow along, I'm just going to punish you. That's not the way you build a cohesive relationship in my world. But, that's just me. Because of the Columbian Exchange, we are going to see disease start to sweep through the Native American populations. And I think I mentioned in one of the videos, or I've even mentioned in class, that over time, over the first 150, almost 200 years, 95% of the native population of North America is going to be wiped out by disease. 95%. And so what's going to happen with the Spanish when this starts happening? Well, their labor system is going to become weaker and weaker. And because of that, they need to find a new source of labor. And guess what? African slaves. They're going to start bringing African slaves into the New Spain. And what this is going to do is they're going to replace the Native Americans, and we're going to see the first use of permanent African slaves in North America. I'm going to try to fix my screen here, guys. Bear with me just a second. Yeah, it's not going to work. All right, we're going to do the best we can. I apologize. I should have, practiced a little bit more, but I didn't. So, okay. Moving on. As I mentioned, the Columbian Exchange is going to, play a huge role in the world. And this map was in your first HIP notebook. And you can see here all the different things that were traded back and forth. I think the biggest effect of the Columbian Exchange is just going to be what I just talked about a moment ago. And that's the death and destruction that was brought about because of it, due to disease. So that's a big, big, big point you got to know. All right. The Columbian Exchange and the resulting death that came from it. Paulina, I am going to try to save it on my YouTube. Normally they're recorded, so it should record. But sometimes what happens is once I'm done recording, it takes a while to process, so it might not come up right away. But it should be there, okay? And then what I'll do is I think it'll be a different link than the live. So once that happens, I'll share that link with you. All right. During this time period, during period 1, we also considered this time period as the colonization of the French and the Dutch, although we're playing with the years a little bit, because the French are going to come along probably about the early 1600s. In fact, their first colony is going to be settled in 1608. Samuel de Champlain is going to settle Quebec. And remember, with the French, he's going to come into the St. Lawrence River, and he's going to travel down that. And along that river, he will plant several colonies, first being Quebec. The biggest thing the French are looking for, yes, it's God, glory, and gold, but they have a completely different attitude about the conversion of the Native Americans than the Spanish did. The Spanish are like, we will convert the Native Americans, whether they like it or not. The French are more like, we would like you to convert, and here's why, and here's what our faith is all about. What do you think? The French also used the Native Americans not for labor, but for knowledge. The French were looking to come in and maybe not set up a lot of permanent settlements. They claimed a lot of land, but they didn't create a lot of settlements. A lot of their people that came over, it's mostly men, almost all men, and they're going to be fur trappers. And they're going to come into the region around the Great Lakes, and they're looking to make their fortune in the fur trade. And they're going to befriend the Native Americans and use the Native Americans for their knowledge of the region. And in doing this, sometimes they would marry into a tribe and build that type of relationship. Never mind, they had a wife back home in France, but one over here is good too, I guess. And so and then that wife will become their guide in the region to lead them to the animals and stuff that they're going to trap. So as the French colonies are developed, they're based around trading posts, and it's an economic foundation. Like I said, they still want to convert the Native Americans, don't get me wrong, but it's not a forced conversion like we see with the Spanish. The Dutch are just here to make a buck. I mean, bottom line, that's what they're going to do. They're going to settle in modern-day New York along the eastern shore. They see they're looking for the deep water ports for trade. The Dutch were the trading capital or the trading geniuses of the world during this time period. And so they're looking also to bring furs out of North America. With regards to the Native Americans, all they really wanted was them just to help them find the furs. So, it wasn't about religion for them. It wasn't about, glory. All of them are seeking glory. That doesn't drop off for any of them. But for the Dutch, it was purely economic. For the French, economic and religion, but not forced religion. Spanish, economic, forced religion, and the glory. And like I said, all of them used the glory. Okay? All right. All right, let's talk about the English, because now that was all period one. Not a whole lot there. Period two is when we start laying the foundation for America, and it starts with the English colonization. Now, English colonization was based on two key reasons. In the New England region, we see religion was the driving force for their settlements, and in the southern colonies, we see economic reasons, the economic motivation. Middle colonies is kind of a cross of the two. In the 13 colonies, like we say, we have three distinct regions with kind of a sub-region as well. You have the New England region, which predominantly, centers around Massachusetts. You have the middle colonies, or the mid-Atlantic colonies, that kind of center around Pennsylvania. And then you have the southern colonies that center around Virginia, South Carolina. Those are the two main colonies. Now, the kicker here is that there's a fourth region, and that's going to be the Chesapeake region. The Chesapeake region is it is Virginia and Maryland, the two colonies that basically surround the Chesapeake Harbor. Both of these colonies are going to be the tobacco farms. That's where you're going to find a lot of the tobacco growing, which I'll talk about here in just a second. Jamestown is our very first colony, settled in 1607. It wasn't easy. Jamestown is going to be settled as a proprietary colony, a joint stock colony. It's going to be funded by the Virginia Company. The Virginia Company had learned from the failure of the Roanoke colony, where what's the dude's name? Oh. Someone type the name of the guy who founded Roanoke for me. John White was the governor, but who paid for it? I can't remember for the life of me. But anyway, Walter Raleigh, that's what it is. I beat you. Walter Raleigh founded the Roanoke colony. He's going to lose all his money because the Roanoke colony failed. Well, with the Virginia colony, with Jamestown, we're going to use a joint stock option where people are going to invest in there. And so if it fails, they don't lose everything. Now, Jamestown, when they came in, they didn't know what they were doing. You had, 104 men on the ship or something like that. Most of these were gentlemen. They'd never worked a day in their life. They decide to land, and they decide, since they picked their region because there were no Native Americans there. And no Native Americans, there's a reason why they're not there. It's because it's a swamp. And Jamestown is going to be built in a very swampy area. And in doing that, they're going to deal with a lot of disease because of mosquitoes and stuff like that. You want to watch a funny video, look up horrible histories, colonization. It's all about the mosquitoes and how they all died and how they ended up eating each other and poop and all this other stuff. But anyway, I digress. Jamestown is going to be saved, though, by John Smith. John Smith is going to take command, his big command for everyone there. He who doesn't work doesn't eat. So if you're not contributing to the colony, you don't benefit from the colony. Now, he's going to get them through the first winter. That first winter is going to be rough, but he is going to forge a relationship with the Powhatan Indians. The Powhatan Indians is the tribe, the Chief Powhatan. That's Pocahontas' father, if you just want a reference. That will get him through the first winter. John Smith is going to end up going back to England, broke his leg. We're not quite sure if, it was broken for him or he broke it or however happened. But basically, he is going to go back to England, and that's going to lead us to 1609, 1610. That winter is known as the starving time. And there's no other way to describe it. They were starving. By the end of the winter, only 60 people were survived. I think we started with something like 300 or something like that. I'm not even sure. But here's the thing. England never gave up on Jamestown. I mean, we went through several very rough winters, but England still saw, a need to keep sending colonists back over there. Even though they were all dying, we're going to send them back, send more and more. And they were going to. These people were going, which just blows my mind. But after 1610, that's when the colony's going to be saved. And who's going to save it? But John Roth. John Roth is going to introduce a new crop that's just going to thrive in Virginia, and that's going to be tobacco. He's going to bring this sweeter strain of tobacco from the Caribbean that they're going to start growing in Virginia, and it's going to come in high demand in Europe. And with that demand, they're going to have to grow more and more and more. Now, John Roth is going to be the reality of the Jamestown story, because the myth was that, Pocahontas and John Smith fell in love because, she threw herself in front of him when her father was about to kill her. But we dispelled that myth a while back when we said that she was only about 11 years old and he was in his late 30s. This was a story that John Smith wrote. It wasn't a story that Pocahontas wrote. She is actually going to be taken captive by the Virginians. And it is there that, as a captive, she's taken to England. She's taught English and all this other stuff. She meets John Rolfe and they do marry. I don't know that it was a true love story. In fact, I doubt that it was. But it did establish peace for a while between the Virginians and the Powhatan Indians. But what's going to happen, though, is when her father, Powhatan, dies, his brother, Opechancanough, is going to take over the tribe. And he saw the English as a threat, moving into their area, moving into their territory. And in doing that, he is going to launch the first of 3 Anglo-Powhatan wars. The very first major battle is going to be in 1622, the massacre at Jamestown. And this is they're going to go through a series of wars. They negotiate a peace and then they go to war again because the English want more land. They negotiate a peace and then they go to land again, or go to war again because the English want even more land. And that's kind of the relationship between the colonists and later Americans with Native Americans. We want more land, we go to war. The war ends, we promise we'll stop. We want more land, we break the promise, and it just keeps going and going and going. Most of the labor that came over for the English colony of Virginia, especially when tobacco plantations started to grow, were indentured servants. And indentured servants, many of them came over under the headright system. The headright system promised to anybody that if you pay for this guy to come over and work in Virginia, we're going to give you 50 acres of land free. This is going to attract a lot of people to invest in labor coming over here. It's also going to provide an opportunity for young men in England and Europe who really don't have a future to come over here and possibly build a future of their own. But what's going to happen over a 40-year period is you're going to have these waves of indentured servants come in, and as they gain their freedom, which the numbers of those who actually gain their freedom is pretty low, not even 50% survived their entire contract, but those who did were often given a small piece of land, and then they could start building their own, quote, empire. But typically the land they were given was garbage. And so you started to have basically a community of former indentured servants who are looking to get better land. The problem is the government in Virginia is not doing anything to help them get that land. They go and say, hey, there's better land over here to the west, and there's some Native Americans there. Can you push them off? And William Berkeley, who was the governor at the time, is going to say no. And he and the House of Burgesses are going to vote against it. Well, these indentured servants feel like they're not being represented in their government. This is going to become a common theme. And so they will rebel against the government of Virginia. It's called Bacon's Rebellion, the very first rebellion in the English colonies. It happens in 1676. They're going to have some success. Look in the bottom right picture. They burned down Jamestown. I guess that's making a statement. Berkeley is going to be recalled back to England, where he's basically read the Riot Act saying, get your colonists under control. In the meantime, Francis Bacon takes over and they start implementing some stuff and raiding Indian villages and getting more land and stuff. Eventually, Berkeley comes back and puts the rebellion down. But here's the thing. We learned something from Bacon's Rebellion. We learned that we don't like rebellions, and that if we hadn't had all these upset indentured servants, maybe this rebellion wouldn't have happened. So the indentured servant labor system, predominantly the headright system, is going to come to an end. And fortunately, we had another labor system in place, because in 1619, about roughly 100 years after the Spanish had introduced them, we started bringing in African slaves into the Virginia colony. 1619, a Portuguese ship was taken by pirates, and there were some African slaves on it. They are going to sell them to a landowner in Virginia. This is going to introduce African slavery into the colonies, but it's going to be after Bacon's Rebellion that it's seen as a viable permanent labor system for the colonies. And over the next 100 years, about 100 years, every single colony, all 13 colonies, will have some form of African slavery in their colony. Now, obviously, the southern colonies, where most of the agricultural work is going on, is going to have the bulk of those slaves. But at some point, every colony in North America, English colony, had African slaves. That's Virginia. Let's talk briefly now about Massachusetts. Now, remember, the New England colonies were settled for religious reasons. Motivations. Two main groups came over. 1620, it's going to be the Pilgrims. The Pilgrims are going to come in. They originally had a charter from the Virginia Company. They blew off course, ended up in Plymouth, Massachusetts, because the charter they had was deemed void because they were not in the right spot. They created their own charter. We call it the Mayflower Compact, kind of like the first written government of our colonial system. And the Mayflower Compact basically said, we are going to run our colony as a democracy. Majority rules. William Bradford is going to be elected the governor of Plymouth, and he will serve as governor for 30 years as that colony grows. Now, the Pilgrims were seeking religious freedom, but they wanted to break away from the Church of England. They saw the Church of England as not the direction they wanted to go with their faith. So they are known as separatists because they wanted to separate from the Church of England. Another group that's going to come, this is 1630, this is going to be the Puritans. The Puritans didn't so much have a problem with the Church of England per se, but more how it was being run and how it was organized. They said it needs to be cleaned up. It needs to be more biblical. So they wanted to purify the Church of England. So both groups looking for some form of religious freedom, but for they were on different tracks. You had the separatists in Plymouth, and you had the Puritans in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Now, the big thing you need to remember about the Massachusetts Bay Colony and the Puritans, their governor, John Winthrop, wanted to create a theocracy. This was not a new, democracy being built here. Remember, the Pilgrims had a democracy, but the Puritans had a theocracy. The church and the state were kind of intertwined. And John Winthrop, as a leader of the church, ran the colony as a religious community. The big thing that he is going to push is that they are the example. Or they don't want to be the example. I should put it that way. His famous City on a Hill speech is often misquoted throughout history as being this, this light that everyone is trying to obtain. But instead, what he said is, hey, the world is watching us and they're expecting us to fail. If we fail, my gosh, how embarrassing that's going to be. We're like this city on a hill, but we don't want to be. We just want to exist and be successful. But because everyone's watching us, we're going to have to work together. We're going to have to be a strong knit community. It's called the Puritan work ethic. We all have to have this work ethic to make our community successful. And it was. The Massachusetts Bay Colony is going to be so successful that from 1630 to 1650, 25,000 Puritans are going to make the trip across the ocean to join the colony. It's known as the Great Migration. So be familiar with that. Just once again, just know the difference between the Plymouth and the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Both for religious reasons, but on different tracks. Now, eventually around 1650, 1660, the two colonies are going to merge, primarily geographically because they grow so much. But they started off as you had separatists and you had Puritans. All right? Cool. All right. Whew. Take a breath. Whew. Let's focus now more on the Puritan community. Remember, I said they set up as a religious theocracy. And as a Puritan, they didn't want any dissenters. They didn't want people saying, hey, what you're doing is wrong. That's what they did to get over here. They told the Church of England, hey, what you're doing is wrong. But when they came here, they said, what we're doing is right, and if you don't like it, you got to go. Two people specifically challenged the church and the Puritan community, Roger Williams and Anne Hutchinson. Roger Williams saw a real problem with theocracy. He said there has to be a separation between the church and the state. They can't be intertwined, because if you do that, the voice of the people will be lost. And so he is going to be asked to leave politely, and he'll be kicked out of the colony, and he will leave, and he will form the colony of New Hampshire. Now, what's interesting about Williams is Williams had some other radical ideas. Like, he thought, maybe we should pay the Indians for their land. I mean, really, can England give away land that's not theirs? And so he is actually going to negotiate a peace with the Native Americans, as well as buy the land from them that he uses for New Hampshire. Anne Hutchinson was really radical. First of all, she was a woman. Second of all, she was having Bible studies in her home. And third, she was like, this whole Puritan work ethic to get to heaven, that ain't what it's all about. It's about grace. And God's grace will get us to heaven, not how hard we work in our community. And so she's going to be asked to leave as well. And what I always find fascinating, and I said it in my video that you guys had to watch, was that when Anne Hutchinson left with her family, 60 other people followed her. And I know 60 in the scheme of, 25,000 is not many, but some of those people who followed her were men. So she was reaching some people. So she was seen as an absolute threat to the Puritan community. So she will go on and she'll go to Massachusetts or to New Hampshire, but then she's going to move on to New York, and she met an untimely death in Brooklyn, New York. Natives killed her. But, she is still seen as a dissenter and as a beacon of religious freedom. Before I go back, real quickly, and I said this in the video that you guys watched, but I want to reiterate this. We have this idea in our country about the individual. Individualism is very important to who we are as Americans. But if you look at the Puritan society, the Massachusetts-based society, they didn't offer that idea. That idea wasn't born out of the New England colonies. The idea of individualism as Americans was born from people like Williams and Hutchinson. They're the ones who said, we should be able to stand up for something different, even if it goes against what our society is telling us right now. So when you think about religious freedom, especially, think about these two, because they're the ones who really introduced that idea to our country. Yes, the Puritans and Pilgrims were looking for it, but they weren't ready to offer it to others, if that makes sense. Okay? Well, the people in New England, like the people in the South, also wanted more land. And this is going to lead to conflict with the Native Americans. Two of the major conflicts are going to be the Pequot War and King Philip's War. Now, you don't need to know all the nitty-gritty details about these wars. Just know why these wars are starting. And honestly, it's very simple. I don't know how I can make it even any more easy than it is. These conflicts between the colonists and the Native Americans were born out of the colonial need to expand, and to expand into Native American territory. And you can say, well, they saw them as savages and they had to put them down and this and that. Maybe that was part of it. Maybe that's what they used to justify these wars. But, as long as they needed the Native Americans, as long as they were trading with them, then there was no problem with the savagery they supposedly lived in. It's when they were able to stand on their own and they wanted to expand their land holdings that you started to have the problems. And so, we used General Patton. Remember I talked about him in the videos. With the Native Americans, it's either lead me, follow me, or get out of my way. With the English, it was absolutely get out of my way. And if you don't, there'll be heck to pay. And that's kind of the relationship the English colonists had with the Native Americans. So the Pequot War, King Philip's War, two major conflicts between the New England colonies and the Native Americans. Okay. I keep checking the stream here. There's no questions, so if I'm missing any, just let me know. But I'll keep pressing on. All right. Let's talk a little briefly about the middle colonies. Now, the middle colonies are kind of a mix of motivated by economics and motivated by religion. William Penn is going to introduce us to Pennsylvania. He wants to create a haven for Quakers. The Quaker religion is a religion also known as the Society of Friends. They were all about the inner light, and God is within us, and we can build a relationship with God here on earth. We don't have to go to heaven. And they were pacifist, and they believed in, peace with the Native Americans. William Penn also purchased land from the Native Americans, very similar to Roger Williams. The Quakers also are going to welcome all faiths, all religions into Pennsylvania. Other colonies that made up the middle colonies are going to be New York, New Jersey, and Delaware. I don't know why I have Maryland here. I'll get to Maryland here in just a second. New Jersey is going to be another, kind of start as another Quaker community, although it's predominantly a proprietary colony. But they're going to buy or purchase land from New York to create kind of an offshoot of Pennsylvania. New York, though, had been a Dutch colony. And the way that England got New York from the Dutch was simple. They just took their warships and docked them off the coast of New York and said, give us your colony or we're going to attack. Now, I'm simplifying it, but that's bottom line what happened. And so when that happened, the king gave his brother, the Duke of York, the naming rights to New Amsterdam. And well, he named it New York. So that's how we got New York. Delaware is Delaware. I mean, it's a proprietary colony, very small colony, not really a lot of... it doesn't really contribute a whole lot now. It will be the first colony to ratify the Constitution, so I guess that's something, but that's in the next unit, so we'll get to that later. I did say I put the Catholics in Maryland here. I'm not sure why. That's just kind of a brain fart on my head. Maryland was part of the Chesapeake colony, or the Chesapeake colonies, but it was actually started as a religious haven for the English Catholics. They were being persecuted over in England, so Lord Baltimore, Cecil Calvert, is going to get I'm drawing blank on words. I told you I was going to get tired. He is going to get a charter to start the colony, and he's going to open it up for Catholics, for English Catholics. Now, what they're also going to do is they're going to open the entire colony to all Christian faiths. As long as you believe in Jesus, you can come to Maryland. It's going to kind of backfire on him, though, because what's going to happen is going to be predominantly Protestants who come in. Bella, I'll answer that question tomorrow, okay? There's a lot that goes into that. All right, so that's Maryland. All right, let's talk Southern colonies. I already talked about Virginia and Maryland, the Chesapeake. The Southern colonies, all about the money. Bottom line, it's about bank. All of these colonies were started as proprietary colonies. We're going to go and make money. I guess the one exception might be Georgia. I don't take Georgia that seriously because, well, it's Georgia. But Georgia was founded by James Oglethorpe as a colony for debtors. People who were stuck over in England in debtors' prison. They gave them an opportunity to come over here and basically earn their keep and earn their freedom. Georgia started off as a very small farms. It's very strict rules. No slavery was allowed in Georgia. No drinking was allowed in Georgia. But it was about the money too, because these folks had to pay off their debt. But when you think of the Southern colonies, boom, about the money. Okay. All right. So just to recap the colonial regions and their economic base. New England relied primarily on commerce or trade. They relied on shipbuilding because of all the lumber in the territory. They were able to build ships and fishing. I mean, they're right there on the coast. Fishing was very good. The middle colonies, staple crops. They're also known as the breadbasket region because they grew the grains, the winter crops, wheat, corn, oats, barley, that kind of stuff. While they had large farms, they're not going to have plantations like you see down in the South. You're going to have large family farms that will grow these staples. And it's not going to be like subsistence farming. It's going to be, they're growing to sell these grains, but they're not going to hit the magnitude that you see of the plantations in the South. And then finally, the South is based on cash crops. Tobacco in predominantly Maryland and Virginia, rice down in South Carolina, indigo is going to be grown in South Carolina as well. North Carolina is going to be interesting. See, initially, guys, the Carolinas or Carolina was a single colony. It's not going to be split for a while. The northern part of Carolina, or what we call North Carolina, these were smaller farms. You didn't see the sprawling plantations that you see in Virginia and South Carolina. But these are going to be small tobacco farmers, predominantly in North Carolina during this time. Know the different regions. That's going to be real important that you know those. All right. During this time, you're going to see the establishment of the triangular trade routes, which is going to be a trade of raw materials coming from the Americas going over to Europe, where they would become finished goods, and slaves coming from Africa going to North America. This was one of your quiz questions today. This passage right here is known as the Middle Passage, a brutal passage, a brutal trip for these people who were jammed onto these slave ships coming over to the New World. Many died along that passage, but it's called the triangular trade because look, it's a triangle. So raw goods to Europe for finished goods, which would come down to Africa to trade for slaves, which would go back over to North America to get more raw goods. And there's all these little things in between, like sugar and stuff that will be traded, and guns and other things. But it's all part of kind of like this triangular motion that we go through in the Atlantic Ocean. Okay? Remember, this word right here, mercantilism or economic regulation. The whole purpose, honestly, for the English colonies and their establishment is mercantilism. And you can say this for the French and the Spanish too as well. It's when the mother country is going to draw raw materials out of a colony and use that to increase their economic strength. It's mostly a trade mechanism, trading raw materials for finished goods. I mean, think about it. All that lumber coming out of New England, going over to Europe, they trade it into furniture. Guess what? That furniture comes back over to the colonies and they sell it to them. So it's a set market for the mother country. But don't think that the colonists were just working for free. I mean, economically, they were doing quite well over in the colonies. I mean, by the 1700s, they have a pretty strong economy. England's going to try to regulate this system with the Navigation Acts, basically saying you can only use English ships, you can only trade with England, all tobacco has to come to England, stuff like that. But they also practice salutary neglect, which was basically we're ignoring the rule, we're not enforcing it. And because of that, the Navigation Acts weren't really taken seriously. And so you had a lot of smuggling going on. But it was smuggling in the open. It wasn't like sneaking around and stuff like that. So it's kind of like, if you're driving down a highway and the speed limit's 85, but they never stop anybody, so you go 100 instead. It's all well and good until they decide to enforce it. Well, for 150, 160 years, England really doesn't enforce any of these regulations. So salutary neglect becomes the basis for everything over in the colonies. That gets us to the 1700s. We're almost done. Two major movements in the 1700s you've got to be familiar with. The first one is the First Great Awakening. This is a religious revival that swept not only through Europe, but through the 13 colonies. Two of the major players in the First Great Awakening, that's going to be Jonathan Edwards on the left and George Whitefield on the right. They're going to go and share their faith throughout the colonies. And the big idea they're going to teach is you don't need a priest or a minister to build a relationship with God. As an individual, you can choose how you want to worship. And in doing that, you can have a personal relationship with God. So this is going to, I talked about this the other day when I was talking about the Enlightenment. This is introducing this idea of individual thought. You can choose your own faith. You can choose the way you want to worship. Now, they're still under that idea of Calvinism, but they also say that, Calvinism is one of those tough things to understand. It's the idea about predestination, that it's already been determined who's going to heaven and who's going to hell. Well, the underlying thing is that you still have a choice. The thing is with Calvinism, it's predetermined because God already knows what you're going to choose. So, it's kind of like he's outside of time, so he can see what's going to happen. So these ministers are teaching you have the choice. You can choose to follow God, or you can choose not to and suffer a burning fate in hell. But it's up to you. You have that choice. You don't need that minister to be a go-between between you and God. You can go directly to him. You can interpret the Bible. You can read it, and you can figure out what it says. So again, individualism is a big idea that came out of the First Great Awakening. The other one is the Enlightenment. And this is what we talked about the other day. And I talked about John Locke and natural rights, the rights of life, liberty, and property. And what John Locke is saying is these are God-given rights, and the government can't take those away. And in fact, it's government's job to protect those rights. And his values are basically, remember I said religious toleration, consent of the government, right of revolution. So basically, this is what came out of the Enlightenment. The government is supposed to protect your natural rights, life, liberty, and property. And the government that's in place is in place because we allow them to be in place. We have given them our consent to govern us. It's like that social contract. And we've given each other the power to we all say we're going to give up a little bit of our freedom so that we can all be protected by our government. That's the social contract. And if our government is not protecting our right of life, liberty, and property, and protecting our values like religious toleration, we have the right to revolt. And it's, Jefferson will go on to say it's our right, it's our duty to overthrow these governments that aren't doing their job. And so this idea of enlightenment is I can choose my own government. I don't have to just fall under the control of a king. Kendall, I'm assuming you're asking about the First Great Awakening. It was Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield. And he was the guy on the right and the one holding up his hands in the middle. Okay? So anyway, are my slides changing, guys? Do you guys see John Locke in front of you? Someone give me a yes or no. I'm waiting for the lag. Okay, they are changing. Good. Thank you, Efren. That is the longest 20 seconds of my life when I sit there and wait for the lag to get an answer. Okay, because on my screen they're not changing, so I was just curious. All right. So, John Locke, cool. All right. So John Locke, what he's introducing is we have the right to choose our own government. And because of, okay, now you're all answered. I thank you. I got it. It's working cool. So from the First Great Awakening, we can choose how we worship. We have that individual ability to do that. John Locke and the Enlightenment, we have the ability to choose our own government. So can you kind of see how both of these ideas, although they have nothing to do with one another, are introducing this idea of individual thought in our country and independence. Independent thought is what I want you to come out with that from these two ideas. This is huge during this time period because these are the foundational blocks that we're going to build a revolution on in about 20 or 30 years. And I was teaching my class tonight for Northwest Vista, and we did the revolution tonight. And I forgot how excited it gets me. It's just one of my favorite things to study. And you guys are going to start it next week, so buckle up because it's coming. But anyway, let's get back. All right. English political traditions. Some of this, is when in some of the videos. When we build our government, it's not just brand new. We don't just make it up. We have some traditions that we actually get from our ideas we get from England. One of those is a constitutional government. We have seen some constitutions in the 13 colonies. The Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, the very first official constitution in the colonies. I was talking to Joseph today. He was asking me about the Mayflower Compact. Is that a constitution? And I basically came to the decision that no, it's not. It's an agreement. It's a compact. But it was the first written agreement of governing that we had in the colonies. But the fundamental orders of Connecticut are the first written constitution, and a constitutional government. They had that in England too. I mean, the English Bill of Rights, all of that, we learned from them. And then we also got the idea of a representative government. We'll see that more in the southern southern colonies, like with the Virginia House of Burgesses and town meetings and stuff like that. So we do get some ideas from political traditions of England, and we'll talk more about that in the next unit. But I wanted to touch on it here. There's your town meetings that that primarily took place in New England, more democratic, egalitarian, because you had to be a property owner, you had to be a member of the church. And then the representative governments down in Virginia, like the House of Burgesses, which a little bit more aristocratic because, again, you had to, you didn't have to be a member of church, but you had to own land. So it was, we didn't have full representation, but there was some. And honestly, this is why Bacon's Rebellion, another reason, because they didn't feel like they were represented in the House of Burgesses. Okay? Don't forget salutary neglect. That's a big thing that's going to come to an end very soon, but it's in this part. All right, I'm going to stop there. That's where I'm stopping because the rest of this PowerPoint is all about the next unit. So this is where I want you to, ask any questions you might have about the test. Anything that might be on the test that I can answer that I didn't hit here. I've got I finished up with 6 minutes to spare. Huge. So any questions you guys have for me, and I know there's going to be a long pause. It's possible I might be able to get Flynn in the video today. He is the good luck charm. I don't know, sometimes he'll jump up here, sometimes he won't, but we'll try to get him up. Typically, if people see Flynn right before the exam, especially the AP exam, they get a 5. So, I always try to get him in the videos. It's one way or the other, but it just depends on his mood. So, all right, okay. Can you explain what Calvinism is? Yeah, Calvinism is the idea that of predestination, meaning that it's already been determined who is going to heaven and who is going to hell. Now that sounds pretty drastic, and that's what, basically the religions of the 1700s are going to believe. The big thing though is what, why, like, Winthrop is going to push the Puritan work ethic and stuff like that. Though they believed in predestination, a lot of predestination has to do with the fact that God is outside of time, and he already knows if you're going to choose to follow him or not. So he already knows if you're on the path or not. So that's the whole idea of predestination. But we talk about Calvinism, a lot during this time period. When we move on, we're going to look at another viewpoint that says, no, we decide whether or not we want to choose salvation. And when we get to that, but just understand, Afrin, that Calvinism is the idea of predestination. It's already been determined whether you're going to go to heaven or hell by somebody. Okay? All right. Any other questions? I'm just going to sit back and relax for this 20-second lag here. Nothing? Bella, I'm going to go ahead and oh wait, here we go. What are the main reasons the colonists left Europe for the Americas? Mary, there were a lot of different reasons. The big reason, when you look at the southern colonies, is to make money. I'm going to focus primarily on England. They're looking to make money, and that's what brings them into the southern colonies. They see this as an opportunity. When you look up in the New England colonies, they are looking for religious freedom. The Puritans, while they wanted to purify the church, because they complained so much about it, they are going to be persecuted for claiming that the church was not being run right. They'll be punished and stuff like that. The Pilgrims, they didn't want to be part of the Church of England, so they wanted to separate from the Church of England. Well, in England at the time, whatever the king was, that's what all the subjects were supposed to be. So if you didn't want to be part of the religion, you just had to leave, and that's what the Pilgrims did. They wanted to separate from the church. So you had those religious motivations there. You had the economic motivations in the southern colonies. Now, why would people just, like everyday people, just get up and leave? Opportunity is the big one. Remember in England or in Europe, you still had the primogeniture laws, which said that the eldest son gets everything. So if you were born second, you were pretty much done. You didn't get anything. So you had the opportunity to come over here and build your fortune, basically. Adventure is another big reason people came over. I mean, this was a land that had not been touched. There was, over in Europe, there wasn't a lot of new land to be settled, if any at all. But over here, that's all there was new land that had been untouched, and, no man had ever walked on it before. So that adventure was another reason. So there was multiple reasons why people came over, but the predominant ones were either economic or religious. Okay. Until another, Bella, I was going to circle around to your question. There will be an opportunity for corrections. Miss Delgado and I are still talking about it. I'm not sure if there's going to be an AP curve, to be honest with you. We're gonna talk about that tomorrow morning, so I can't give you a straight answer for that. But generally, we do have some form of corrections, and when we do those, it's generally for like half credit or something like that. But we have to have a meeting tomorrow morning, then we'll decide. Okay. Any other questions, guys? I don't see anything popping up. I think I'm coming up on 9 o'clock here, and I said I wanted to do this from 8 to 9. So if there's any last minute questions, get them up now, and I'll hang out. I'll put on the countdown right now. We got I'll give you about there is no AP curve yet. Don't worry about it. Yeah, Andres, don't worry about that. If there is one, I'll explain it when we get there. But we don't have one right now. Few more seconds. Afrin, you're welcome. I appreciate it. All right, guys. I'm not seeing anything pop up. Hopefully, I covered everything for you. Again, as I'm just wrapping up, remember, as you're studying, looking at stuff, for tomorrow's test, look at the big ideas. You're going to have 48 minutes to do 30 questions, which is plenty of time, so you can take your time and just remember what we talked about and what we studied. Look at your notes from the videos and stuff. If there's something from the videos you don't remember, that's why they're there. They're on the YouTube channel. You can go watch them over again, watch certain parts of them if you want, and you can do all that. So it's all there for you. I'm trying to think. I don't even know what else to say. You guys have a good night. That's our first review. We got through it. First test tomorrow. Get a good night's sleep. And we'll see you tomorrow, all right? So I am going to end this stream, and I'm going to say good night. Let me see if I can get Flint up here real quick. I'm going to see, because you got to be able to see him. Come here. Come here, buddy. Get up here. Come here. You gonna get up? Come on. You don't want to be a star? Come here. Oh, come on, Flint. All right, here he goes. Oh, I know. I'm sorry. There we go. He wants to play. Sorry. You kind of got to see him. So there you go. Guys, have a good night, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye. End. And we're out.